It can be done. You may have to actually do it in a team that's an hour away from the team that we talk about, but it can be done. Contrary to what people say, Al, this morning on the radio, people were saying it can't be done. I don't understand that. I mean, obviously, it just happened. It literally just happened with Furman, and the team is not very far away from Clemson. Now, obviously, different conference, so some people are probably going to say, "Oh, different conference. There's no way they can handle it. It's not the same. ACC is different." But what do you say to that, Al? Can Clemson be that team? Now, Mickey said, "I said, what's the goal for Clemson in basketball? What's the goal?" And Mickey said, "Well, the goal should be at least every other year getting into the NCAA tournament. Every other year. So 2 out of 4 years getting into the NCAA tournament." I am not a big follower of Clemson basketball, so I don't know how realistic that really is in the basketball environment. Mickey says it's very attainable. I mean, I don't really know. So, Al, is it attainable? Is it something is that the standard that Clemson should have? Get into the NCAA tournament? Because obviously we now even have a bitter pill to swallow as a Clemson fan, seeing Clemson beg to be in the NCAA tournament, demand even, and then one and doneer at a home game with the NIT, and then the very next day see Furman beat Virginia, the ACC team. So, Al, can it be done? What's the standard? What's your expectations for Clemson basketball?
Yeah, it can certainly be done. I mean, we've done it before. We had the Sweet 16 appearance against Kansas not too terribly long ago anyways. I mean, we've done it before. We can do it again. I think the standard's tough because, I think every other year is a realistic expectation. And I think I don't have any problem with that. Every other year being in the NCAA tournament, no issues with that whatsoever. That wouldn't be my standard. Now, the problem becomes, what are you judging a coach off of, whether they're, hired or fired or whatever it may be? Because if you're judging them off of a realistic standard, that's great. Okay. But if you're judging them off of, hey, we need to be in this tournament every year and playing to win a national championship, that's what you want. You play the game to win a national championship, right? Of course. That's what everybody should be doing. But it's not realistic, and it's not realistic for Clemson basketball either. So yeah, I think every other year in the NCAA tournament is fine. I don't think that's really an issue. And next year is going to come down as far as expectations. You got to find a way in the NCAA tournament. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You can say we didn't deserve to be there after we lost to Morehead State or whatever. We deserve to be in the NCAA tournament this year, and I'll continue to say that. Third in the ACC, tied for third. Beat a bunch of the teams that made it in there. I just think it was a no-brainer. We should have been in. And hey, you've already got the built-in excuse for the loss, right? We didn't want to be there. That's what everybody does, right? I hate that kind of crap. I don't like it. You made the NIT. You chose to play in the NIT, and once you did that, you should have been giving it everything you had to win it all. So that was a tough loss. It was a brutal loss. I understand why Clemson fans are upset. I get it. I am too. But honestly, once we missed out on the NCAA tournament, when I felt we were deserved to be in there, I was just kind of like, whatever. It happens. I'm disappointed they kind of flamed out as quickly as they did in the NIT. I would have liked to see them make a run. Heck, those environments in NIT get really cool, by the way. If you've not ever been to any of those games, there's some really cool games there. In the environments, they get really loud, really boisterous, and it's a lot of fun. But it's not to be. Now we're on to next year. It seems like Brownell is still going to be the guy. So that'll upset at least one host on the show, I know. But I don't know. I'm not as Houston on this as Houston. As far as should Brownell be here, should he not? I think he's done a decent job. It's just at some point, I think you have to decide whether decent's good enough or not. And I think Mickey says this a lot. He talks about if you're just going to settle for decent, and that's what you're going to get, and that's okay. But I just think at some point you got to try something different. And, I think Brownell, like I said, has done fine. He's, had a good run or two, but that's about it. And he's been here a long time, y'all. Brad Brownell's been here a long time. And I think, maybe a new change of scenery might be something we need, kind of like we're revamping the offense in football. I think that might be something to look at.
Clemson University basketball team loses in the first round of the NIT 68-64 against Morehead State from the Ohio Valley Conference in Kentucky. Morehead State, Kentucky. You know, that's a team that obviously I think Brad Brownell came out and said, hey, they're not a team to just take lightly because they will take you down. And guess what they did? They did take you down 68-64. Chase Hunter had 18 points, 6 of 11 shooting. PJ Hall had 13 points. A lot of, to me, poor shooting from Brevin Galloway, who's a guy who wanted to win. I mean, he came out on social media and said that he wanted to have his final ride with Clemson, his hometown team, the team that he always dreamed of being on. You know that his heart was in it, but his shooting ability wasn't in it. I mean, his stat line is not very good. Was not very good. Hunter Tyson also didn't really have that good of a shooting game when they needed him. So these two guys who were the two starters on the team, Hunter Tyson, one of those guys have been kind of hinted at as one of the best players in the ACC, really struggled. And that's kind of what happened. Really, you know, you saw them. Morehead State basically said, hey, we dare you to shoot threes, just like people do when they play against me. They see how bad I am in the three-pointer. They see how inconsistent I am. They're not worried if I hit 1 out of 9 or 1 out of 11 because, you know, for the most part, they're going to be bricks and they'll get the rebound and move on. And that's basically what happened with Clemson. Their offensive rebounding has not been good all year, so there's no shock there, really. Their shooting has been better than it was, but, you know, it's one of those things. It's the way basketball goes. Now, on the flip side, Walt Deptula said this tonight. You know, Brad Brownell actually, in the past 5 years, has had a better body of work than his entire 13 years. So the 13 years as a whole is there are definitely some droughts and some bad, you know, basketball where he improved from being a team. Al, you know, we've been to a game. I think it was either Clemson, North Carolina State or Clemson, Florida State. Remember we went to this game. This was before it was renovated and it was like halftime 19-21. And I looked over to you and I said, this is brutal, bro. This is absolutely brutal. It was back when Brad Brownell was nothing but defense, right? I do feel like he's molded himself into a guy who could develop a team that can shoot, and they were able to do and score a lot of points this year, but they still had those inconsistencies. Al, Houston, you remember me calling you Houston at night after doing a highlight reel for the basketball radio show. I mean, I would sit there during the game and there would be highlight after highlight after highlight. And then all of a sudden 8 minutes of nothing. And I'm just sitting there listening to the radio call, like, when are they going to make another basket? Well, that's basically what happened again is they went on like an 8-minute drought again. And you just can't have that, especially in playoff basketball, in tournament basketball. You got to be more consistent than they were. Houston, I'll throw it to you. I know you got a lot of thoughts. This is obviously the heartbreak. I put down the heartbreak because to me, you're number 1 seed in the NIT. But there's a lot of mixed feelings. As Al mentioned, Amir Sims went on Twitter and said, hey, you know, there was a big letdown from not getting into the NCAA tournament. And at the end of the day, most players don't really care about the NIT.
That's great. Great to hear from players. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing that we heard around Brandon Streeter, that we heard around Jack Leggett, that we heard around Monty Lee. It's boiling down to it's becoming excuses. All right. You want to do that against Virginia in a road environment where you lose a game by 6, fine by me. I get it. But when you do it to a 3-23 Louisville team or a bottom-feeding Boston College team or a barely over 10-win South Carolina team or to lose by 20 to Loyola or to lose at home, and this is the second time in Brad Brownell's career that he's blown over a 15-point lead at home in the first round of the NIT to a team that they were outmatched. They were able to have a size advantage. You had better shooters. You typically have a better defense, and you let this team just walk in and do whatever they wanted. And there was no change, no adjustment, no nothing. Nothing. There was no adjustments. It was honestly Clemson's offensive strategy in basketball reminds me of what Monty Lee's strategy in baseball is. Get up there, swing for the fences, and if you just strike out, well, there's nothing we can do. And that's what Clemson's offense is. All right. And we want to sit here and say, well, he's gotten better as time went on. And maybe he has, but it's still mediocre. And like, I want to talk about the standard here. I'll tell you what the standard should be. I'm not looking for a national championship, right? What I want is you can be an okay team, an all right team. I'm watching one right here, Iowa. I was not beating the doors in with anybody. I was not a team that scares me. In fact, Clemson only lost by one this year to Iowa, and they're getting worked by Auburn in the tournament. They're in the tournament as an 8 seed, and they were able to win close games. And they've made multiple tournaments in the last 5 or 6 years. I don't know off the top of my head, but like they've been a lot more than Clemson has. And if I were to say, let's break down a decade, all right, the standard should be 8 out of those 10 years, you just make it. 8 out of those 10 years, you don't make it. Doesn't have to be advancing or doing anything like that. Just make it 8 out of 10 years. Because we've had coaches do this. We've had coaches be here for short tenures. All right, Rick Barnes, 3 years in a row. And Clemson did not give him the necessary things to build, so he was out. All right. You had Oliver Purnell, who inherited just a dumpster fire from Larry Shyatt, and it took him, 2-3 years? 3 straight tournaments. And then he felt like he had tapped out his potential and left. Brad Brownell inherited a team going into its 4th straight tournament in a row. That's never happened. And from there, he went no tournament, NIT, no tournament, lost in the first round as a top seed in the NIT, Sweet 16 run, no tournament because of COVID, lost in the first round of the tournament, no tournament, lost in the first round of the NIT. That's mediocre. And it's time to go. All right. I'll take a hard stance. I'll take the heat for it from anybody who wants to be a but he had a record number or whatever. That's great. But you still lost to Morehead State at home, and you didn't make the tournament. And you're losing talented players going out the door that I don't know if you're getting that back next year. You don't know if you're getting PJ Hall back next year. That's the biggest difference to me. Are we going to sit around here next year and really believe that if you lose Hunter Tyson, Brevin Galloway, and PJ Hall, that this team is going to really have a shot at the tournament? You better hit the portal really good. And then on top of that, you look at the Furman game today, and you look at them be able to adjust, come back, and beat Virginia in a neutral site simply by just switching up the defense and switching up a little bit of their offensive motion, and they came back and won. You don't really see that with Clemson. They've done that a few times against inferior opponents, but no one like that. It's very rare. Honestly, the only time that I can remember is in Chapel Hill when Brad Brownell got incredibly lucky and they won that game, right? But at the end of the day, you've got a team doing that, and you've got a team that's consistent. Furman has a similar history to Clemson when you look at the SoCon. They went 4 or 5 times in a row in the 70s when they were really good. They didn't go for a while. They went 80, and then they haven't been back since. And all of a sudden, they come back in the tournament. You've got a coach who's won 20-plus games since he took over a dumpster fire of a program. And we're talking about, well, he's got to have more time. No. All right? You're lucky that a lot of the teams around here have filled up coaching positions so early because he might still be available next year. But you've got an example, a glowing beam of light that says, here's your sign right here, right? You need to do something.
John Sarian gets in and says, my favorite excuse is, quote, who you going to get that's any better? He says, geez. Now, I use this when I talk to my boss on my one-on-ones on my yearly. I say, hey, I know I'm not what you want, but who are you going to get any better? That's my question. Who are you going to get any better? And you know what? I've been with the company 10 years now. I mean, it's called the Brad Brownell. It's called the Brad Brownell way of doing your performance agreement. Okay. It works. So sue me.
Yeah, well, I mean, now that you go, well, who are you going to get any better? The guy that's 15 minutes from my house that just beat Virginia. That's who. So, tell me how many times
now, I'll ask Virginia. You this. You really think that Furman's coach is going to come to Clemson? I mean, he's been there for a long time, right?
No, he's been there since 17. Look, I can't say that I have inside sources here, right? I'm just reading tea leaves with people that I know close to the situation. He wanted to go to South Carolina, and South Carolina turned their nose up at him. And they wanted either Sean Miller or the guy that beat him last year. He would have gone to South Carolina, and then he pulled his name out of that when they realized that they weren't going to take him. So I think he would absolutely jump at the opportunity to come to Clemson, especially because he's got family in the upstate. I think he wants to stay in the upstate. I think there's really only one job that he would take outside of Furman. That's Clemson. And since South Carolina is not available right now, I think he would take a Clemson job.